On this episode, I'm starting with the speaker covers. I pulled them off the sails. And you'll notice that they are sort of a faded gray, a lot of dirt on them. And I went down to my local Joann's. That's right, I said Joann's. It's kind of like a Michael's, but it's a Joann's. Rather than using a gray material, I chose to go with a black material to match my new headliner. I basically pulled the fabric off the plastic frame, and I used it as a template. So you could see I placed the gray now template over the black fabric, and I cut myself out a brand new piece to glue on top of the plastic frame. I'm using a 3M multi-purpose adhesive. And honestly, this was pretty easy to do. It really only took me about 20 minutes. And if your speaker covers are looking faded or dirty, this is a pretty easy solution. I purchased new door panels off of eBay. Not sure if I mentioned this before, but I was entirely missing the door panels, including all the plastic components. So a lot of this stuff was coming in, and honestly, I'm really happy with the quality of the product that I got. Got a bunch of these plastic components from my door panels. And, speaking of, new door panels. Ah, it's dark. And hey, there's the speaker covers in there. You can't see anything. Nah, whatever. I just broke the mount for the camera, so it's gonna be wobbly as I hold this. So ever since I got the car, there's been like a weird, I don't know, it's like a metal rattling type sound. Not quite like a bad catalytic converter. It's more like, it actually sounds like there's a heat shield under there, something, grinding against something, but as far as I know, there's not many heat shields under there. You know, it's an old car. So I'm gonna get under there and hopefully figure out what's going on. So that's what we're doing. So I'm kind of doing like the old school technique of using a baseball bat to, you put, I got the Yankee game on, so I'm going to walk away because I don't have the express written consent from the New York Yankees. So I'm using the old school technique where you use a wooden bat to kind of place it on different things, and you put your ear on the other end to kind of narrow down what's rattling. And it sort of is working, but not really. But I've kind of narrowed it down into one area, and it's right where the shield is for the flywheel. I think it's called a dust shield for the flywheel. So I'm about to pop that off and get a look under it. So let's do that now. So you're going to have to trust me here, but what I was attempting to demonstrate is the clanking noise that I was hearing from the area of the torque converter. Unfortunately, my microphone wasn't working, so like I said, go ahead and trust me. Now this particular clanking sound was different from what a catalytic converter would sound like if the catalytic converter had gone bad. This clanking sound was a little bit deeper. I'm going to lower the transmission down so I can get to the torque converter. I'm pulling these bolts out. They are actually oddly enough, standard. They're 9/16. I thought they were 14 millimeter at first because they're basically the same size. That's annoying, but the 14 was just a tad too small, and the bolt got stuck in my socket. But now I got the correct 9/16, and we're gonna knock it out. And what I'm basically showing here is the trick that I did to use a little bit more leverage to get this particular bolt off. I locked in one end of the wrench to the other, and I was able to basically extend the length of the size of the wrench and get some extra leverage. The top two bolts for the transmission were very difficult to get to. What I had to do was literally place my entire body on top of the motor, remove the distributor, and I was able to squeeze my hand behind the motor in between the motor and the firewall to get the top two bolts out. I lowered the transmission very carefully, and I quickly noticed that I forgot to disconnect a couple cables on the driver's side of the transmission. Now, I've done this before on an older car. On this particular model, there's a few extra electrical components, so it's just something to be aware of if you're doing this at home. I'm able to get a good look at the flex plate here, and what I found is it's actually in really good shape. Now regardless, I'm going to move it anyway because now that I'm this deep into the project, I figure I might as well get a good look at the rear main seal. Now that I've removed the flex plate, I've noticed that the teeth have this kind of like shiny glossy edge to them, and I'm thinking that this is when my starter would kind of make... My starter was actually missing occasionally when I turn the ignition, and I'm thinking that this is when the starter would kind of graze against the flex plate and kind of scratch against it. This is probably not the rattling sound I was hearing. This is probably just something different. Now I'm inspecting the rear main seal, and actually overall it looks pretty good. But again, I'm this deep into it, I might as well change it out while I'm here. I'm noticing a few rust spots, so I'm going to go ahead and spray it with a little bit of Rust-Oleum. While the transmission's out, I quickly notice that the gasket is pretty much deteriorating completely away. In fact, there it is, I pulled it right off. So while it's out, this would be a really good time to change the gasket and the filter. And since I'm opening it up anyway, I can get a good look at the fluid inside. What I'm basically looking for is a sort of a metallic glow in the fluid or small metal pieces, and fortunately I found none of that here. In fact, the transmission looks really good. To remove the rear main seal, I'm using a screw and then channel locks and just basically pulling really hard. Now to install the new rear main seal, I have this special tool that I got off Amazon, and it's specifically for my motor, and it made the installation really simple. I just got done torquing down the flex plate, so now I'm going to install the torque converter onto the transmission. And here's my new torque converter. I'm going to add oil. Now it's tough to tell from this video, but when I install the torque converter onto the transmission, I'm feeling for clicks, so I'm turning it back and forth and I want it to click into place. Now naturally I'm a tremendous Natalie Imbruglia fan, so I'm jamming out here. Once everything's reinstalled, I added my transmission fluid and I attempted to shift through the gears, and I got nothing. As it turns out, the shifter cable was broken, and unfortunately I had to go ahead and replace that as well. In order to replace the shifter cable, I had to remove the center console. Alright, this is actually my second test drive now, because the first one, the audio wasn't recording on this GoPro, and I'm going to tell you right now, GoPros are not good for vlogging. Don't let anybody tell you different. This thing's a pain in my ass, but it gets some cool footage. So the rattling is gone. That was the initial problem that started this gigantic project. Even though the rattling's gone, I can't say definitively that it was the torque converter, because at this point, we've removed I ended up replacing so many parts. I ended up doing the flex plate, I ended up doing the starter, and just the fact that I was under there touching things, I might have touched something that was rattling, I don't know. I still think it was the torque converter, but again, there's no way of being 100% sure. This job kind of spiraled out of control. By the time I got the transmission off, I was like, do the torque converter, and then I was like, do the flex plate, do the rear main seal, do the starter, and just to get the transmission off the motor, I had to pop the distributor cap off, so now we're talking a new cap and rotor. So, there's a lot of new things on this car now that's pretty cool. And I'm loving the way it's running right now. It's running a little rich. I think I gotta adjust the timing when I get back, but overall, it feels way better than it did before. Oh, and I almost forgot to even mention, I had a shifter cable problem. But when I got the car started earlier, I couldn't get it into gear. It wouldn't shift. It turns out the shifter cable was destroyed. I guess I broke it when I was either removing it or reinstalling it. So I go down to the auto body. So I go grab a new one, I install that one, and that one breaks. So this is actually the third shifter cable now, and this one seems to be fine. This is the type of thing you run into with these cars. I called the dealership, and he said that the part was discontinued. So you have to use these cheap aftermarket parts that just kind of suck. And that was it. Your hands are tied. You got to put this cheap part on the car. It sucks, but what are you going to do? Alright guys, I appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot for tuning in. If you like this video, please subscribe. See you next time.